And I know that Dr. Hwang has been working at looking at some new ways to better understand even existing treatments for cancer, and how do we incorporate multidisciplinary care and trying to better understand the best ways to even use therapies that we have now that are maybe underutilized.
Doctor, you do great work.
Thank you very much. You do as well, Mr. Vice President.
If you want to talk about foreign policy, really know.
I can't speak to that, but I can say a few words about what we're doing with multidisciplinary care at Duke. And I'm joined here by Dr. Kim Blackwell, who's really my partner in crime. And I think we do a fantastic job of trying to coordinate all the different disciplines that need to come together to treat a patient with cancer. You talked a little bit about how hard it is to get different silos to communicate, and I think we've started breaking down some of those silos in the clinical care realm. It used to be that surgeons like myself wouldn't even talk to the medical oncologists, wouldn't talk to the radiation oncologists. We certainly wouldn't talk to the basic scientists. And as a surgeon now, at Duke, in this day and age, I think it's really key that we work collaboratively, not only among the different clinical disciplines, but with the basic scientists as well. I'd like to address a point that you made about big data. One of the exciting initiatives we have in our group is that we recognize that it's really difficult to get meaningful data out of the big electronic warehouses that we all have in our institutions. Our initiative in the breast group is to try to organize data at the point of care, so that when we enter patient data, as we all need to do when we write our notes, we structure the data so that we don't get garbage in, garbage out. We put in clean data, we put in structured data, so that when it comes time to try to pull that data back out of the system, we can do it in a very reliable and structured way. I think the federal government may have a potential role in this, just as it recommended that all healthcare providers consider transitioning to an EMR system. I think that's been done very successfully, but I think the next and very important step is to try to get the data into the system in a way that it can be shared and that it will be meaningfully shared among all the different users of the data. I think physicians such as myself and Dr. Blackwell, others in the group, would be very important in trying to define how those data elements should look. I think other stakeholders on the panel as well as in the audience can also speak to the important data elements that patients and caretakers might want to see in that data as well. So I think that is a role that the federal government can take, and I think a lot of us would welcome leadership in that realm. There are many different data dictionaries, and I think there definitely is an opportunity to try to harmonize them across all different institutions.
Well, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
I found when Dr. Agus talked about standardization, Dr. Collins is the head of NIH and very knowledgeable in the human genome, was a major part of that effort. And Agus at USC talked about there is a standard as it relates to the genome. How difficult, or how necessary and or how difficult would it be to come up with a standardized, essentially, vocabulary, for lack of a better phrase, as to how to record the data? Should there be a national medical board to come up with standardization of the language? Should we look to the oracles and the major tech companies to try to help on that, or is it necessary?
I think it's absolutely necessary. I think it's important for us to all talk the same language, and just as we say when we're talking about a broken leg or a fracture, it means the same thing, and we need to be able to define it in a way that when we pull the data out, it is recognized as the same thing. The NCI had some big initiatives around this, and particularly around cancer about 10 years ago. And I think although that was a really important effort, I think that the limitation of that was that it really didn't gain traction around the users that could really give it life. And so it sort of died an untimely death in the NCI. And I think if there had been more effort, potentially more funding to gain traction from those institutions, those users who would be responsible for entering the data, I think that could have been a much more successful venture.
Well, I'm interested to hear you say that. As I understand, and I don't know, The history of the last effort was it met with resistance in addition
You're
to.
talking about CA Big.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
funding. Can I ask you another question, Doctor, because you've done so much work in this area. What are some of the most promising areas for cancer diagnosis and detection? Because you guys here are ahead of the curve on a number of things, including other cancers that we haven't spoken about. And the same, I think, at the University of North Carolina. I may be mistaken, but I think that's true. Tell me what are there promising areas that are potential breakthrough technologies to be able to deal with diagnosis and detection?
So I'll take a shot at this, and there are lots of others who I'm
And then
sure
I'd like
can
to hear
chime
from
in as
anybody else
well.
who wants to speak to that.
I think the limitation currently is not our technology. I think our wisdom in knowing what we're picking up at ever earlier phases is what's really lagged behind the technology. So technology tends to be very black and white. You see it there or you don't. The wisdom of knowing how to translate that into action that will benefit the patient, I think that's the part where we need to work more. So it's not about diagnosing a cancer, it's about diagnosing a cancer that we know can potentially be fatal and applying precision medicine to those cancers that are likely to be fatal and not overtreating those ones that are likely to never cause a patient harm. I think as we've become smarter about which cancers are likely to be associated with a poor outcome, and many in this room have contributed to furthering the field on that, I think our ability to know what it is that we need to do to address those cancers that are being detected is where we need to do the most work. I think technology is far ahead of our ability to know what to do with the ever earlier cancers, ever more refined and precise diagnoses that we're making. And we're making strides with that, but there's obviously a lot more work that needs to be done.